So hello out there. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the, I believe, final, maybe second to last set in this series of webinars that Los Artistas is hosting. And this topic today is about writing an artist statement and artwork descriptions. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and I'll introduce myself. It's very strange not being able to see everyone that's here, but you're out there. Okay, so yeah. So how to write an artist statement and your artwork descriptions. My name is Jess Tolbert, and I'm an artist. I'm also an educator. More specifically, I make jewelry, and I teach at the University of Texas, El Paso. I'm the head of the Jewelry and Metals program there, and I've been in El Paso for about 5 years now. And so I hope today that we can kind of go through what it's like to write an artist statement, and hopefully you'll get something out of it and be able to maybe refine yours or kind of get some tools that you can use to help do that. I understand that you've gone through a few other, these webinars. So you know by now how to set up your e-commerce, how to take photos, how to price the work and then package it to ship it. So as a part of that kind of online selling, right, you need to be able to, you need to be able to explain what the work is, right? You need to sell it to people. And so that's where the writing comes in. So let me advance my screen. Okay. So like the first question I think is, what is an artist statement even, right? And the second is, why do you actually need one? So to answer the second question first, most everyone here I think is maybe kind of preparing to sell their work online. And so that's obviously the place for a statement is online. You might also need one because you are working with a gallery and they've requested a statement from you and you need that for their website or anything that they're producing. Maybe you're going to be preparing a new body of work and you need to submit it to a juried exhibition. So you need a statement for that. You might need it just for your own website. Maybe you're not selling your work, but you want to promote it through your own website. How about a grant application? You might need it for something like that as well. Those are all different kind of instances where you might need one, and not all of them, that's not a complete list necessarily. So once you know why you need one, then you can kind of tackle that first question about what is the thing, like what is the statement and what should you include in that statement? And finally, how do you go about answering those questions to create that final statement? I think it's really important to recognize that as artists, we really don't spend a lot of time working on our writing skills. If we did, we might be writers, right? So it's a really daunting kind of task. And it really is difficult, I think, when you first get started, because it's really new, just like when you first learn to do any new skill. But just like that, with practice, a few kind of tools in your tool bag, right? Like it'll get a little bit easier. You'll find those words that you need to express yourself and your work, and hopefully be able to provide viewers that connection to your work. Okay, so really the artist statement can be anything. It can be anything you want it to be, but primarily it should help viewers, whether they're potential buyers, they're jurors of exhibitions, they might be employers, you're applying for some type of job, a grant reviewer, whoever they are. You want them to be able to understand what you believe is the most important aspect of your own artwork and the techniques that you use to make it. It should really complement your work and be able to stand on its own. It should provide details that maybe the work itself isn't able to. So that's stuff like the process information. So is it screen printed clothing? Is it hand forged flatware, watercolor landscape painting? Like how is it made? What is it? Also, what material is it made from? Is it made from watercolor? Is it made from silver? What are the materials in it that the work doesn't shout at you when you look at it? Perhaps your inspirations might be included in your statement, but I kind of think that that's not the most dominant theme or thing in your statement, especially if we're kind of gearing for selling online. Like that's not the most dominant thing. Finally, also the context of the work, meaning, is this a functional piece? You should probably include that in there, right? Like this is a functional piece of jewelry. This is something to be worn, right? You should explain that to the viewer if it's not obvious, you know? Or maybe it's something you're writing a grant application to propose a public art kind of sculpture. So you need to put that context into the work and let the audience know what it is. Okay, so it really kind of depends on where your statement is going, and we're going to get more into that, what the statement's final kind of destination is. But in general, it should really summarize those things in a really succinct way, perhaps in as few words or sentences as possible. And that really just depends, again, on the place that it's kind of meant for. It really shouldn't be some lengthy dissertation on your place in the history of art, you know, like it shouldn't really be big and fluffy in that way, I don't think. Yeah, just a few words and sentences that really get the point across, especially for the online marketplace. You got to think like online, right? You are dealing with distractions. You know, people have a million tabs open, as I always do, and they might, you know, be shuffling between many things. And so you're not going to keep their attention for very long. So you got to really strike them with those few sentences that you can come up with. Also, like, it's important to recognize what the statement is, but also what isn't it? Like, what should it not be? I really don't think it needs to be this full explanation of your work. You don't have to tell them everything, right? And it should really not compensate for something that lacks in the work. You shouldn't say something that really isn't there. Like, if it's not evident in the work, then don't write it, you know, don't put it in there. And kind of avoid those sort of big, grand, lofty ideas that you really can't see in the work itself. You don't want to lose viewers because they can't really connect to what they're reading or seeing. So that's really not its intent. It's really also not something that's opinion-based. You should be matter of fact. You want to be really confident also in your writing. You don't want to put yourself down, obviously. You don't want to, you know, say, oh, I could have done this, right? Viewers don't want to read that. You also don't want to like lift yourself up too much either. You don't want to be really arrogant in your writing. You just write about what it is. So for example, you want to avoid statements that say things like, I aspire to represent nature in my painting. Instead, just say, my work represents nature. Just say it, just like go for it, you know, like don't beat around the bush. Again, like I hope to express, no, say my work expresses. Be really, really like kind of blunt in that way and to the point in that way. Okay, so where is the statement going, right? And that really depends on that context of what you're doing. You're selling it online, you're applying to a grant, you're making the statement for your website, for a catalog of your work. Maybe it's a press release for a new project. There's a lot of different places, right? So you're really going to need a few versions of your statement. There's never going to be just one, I don't think. And they might be kind of, yeah, they're variations of themselves, and they will go from really short to really long, right? 50 words to 500 words, and sometimes maybe longer and sometimes maybe shorter too. So if you're selling your work online, I really think that that shorter version of your statement is going to be the most beneficial. And so I'm going to show you some examples of that, and we'll talk about that more specifically. If you're doing something like a juried exhibition, you're applying to something, and they want, well, they'll often give you limitations. They'll say artist statement, no more than 500 words. So you really need to pay attention to those limitations that they give, or they might say it needs to be exactly that many, you know, that word count or character count. So really pay attention to what those are, and you can adjust accordingly. I think if you have a longer version of your statement, it will be really beneficial to you in terms of starting with something longer and being able to pull from it, pluck from it, kind of kernels like that you can use for those shorter versions of your statement. In general, you might want to think about having almost two versions of your statement. The first being something that is more about yourself as an artist in general, and your main themes that you work with in your work, your motivations, what inspires you, that kind of thing, who you are. And your second would be a statement or statements, plural, that are about specific bodies of work, right? Because maybe you make in series, maybe you make kind of different, different series of work, and they each need their own statement, and that big general one might not cover all of that information. So let's look at some examples. And I'm going to start here with like the really quick 1-sentence statement, and sort of like an elevator pitch, right? So this definitely can work really well on a website, I think. And not even in a website, like just think about all the times you get asked, like, what do you do? Right? Like, what is it that you do? How great is it to have this really neatly summarized single sentence that kind of explains to people what it is that you do, right? So it's good practice to have this. So this is a contemporary craft gallery in Santa Fe called Hecho a Mano, and they kind of feature like a variety of artists. And so this is just a screenshot from their website and from their homepage of their website, actually. And they've got 2 artists featured right there, New Mexican printmakers. And both of those statements are great. They're single sentences, and they say a little bit, if not a lot, like about what these artists do. So like Michaela Patton is a multimedia artist now based in Santa Fe. This is the single sentence. She creates work using alternative printmaking methods, traditional beadwork techniques, papermaking, and other mixed media. So in that single sentence, we know the different techniques that she uses, right? We get a whole variety, and we understand what this artist might work with, okay? And even in the gallery's own statement about their gallery, they have a single sentence, and it says, Hecho a Mano primarily showcases New Mexican and Mexican artists working in the mediums of printmaking, ceramics, and jewelry. And so in one sentence, they really explain exactly who they are and what they do. So that elevator pitch, I think, is a great thing to have. Here's, again, from that website, and some an example of Michaela Patton's work and the way that you'll see it, each of her individual pieces represented on their website. So this kind of gets into the artwork description part, right? You've got these kind of 2 things to think about. And in this, you see that it's really simple, actually. And they don't provide a statement necessarily about the work. What they provide is details about how it's made, what it's made from, the size of it, the year it was made, obviously its title, and a price, or sold in this case. And so it's a really kind of basic way of on the website of laying it out, and that's fine, right? Like, we got the general statement on the homepage, it directed us here, and then we have some information about what we're looking at. Here again are some other pieces of Michaela Patton's printmaking. And so again, it's like very consistent how they're doing it. They're keeping it all in the same format with the artist name, the title, the date, medium, dimensions, price, and that never wavers. So that gets a little bit into like how you set up the website. But I think too, how you write, like how can you be consistent in the description of the work and kind of keep that throughout, right? So yeah, here on their, if you look at the top right, it says artworks and biography. So under artworks is what we were just looking at. And then if you click on her biography, you get a little bit more information. And so what we see is not necessarily more than that single sentence, but what you see is another strategy in terms of writing your statement that combines it with kind of your biographical information. And I think that's fine. I think that it sort of just depends on what you're doing. And obviously, like when you're shopping around online and you are looking at handmade things, don't you want to know about the person? Like, don't you want to know where they're from, like who they are? So this is a way to kind of combine that stuff, the bio info plus that single kind of elevator pitch statement. And then even a little bit more about her bio in terms of where she studied and kind of maybe awards that she's received or different things like that. I think like pay attention, right, to the key words that are used in the statement as you look at work. I think that's really helpful. Ask yourself if it resonates. If you read someone's statement, do you see that in their work? And if you do, then that's probably a clue that you're reading a really successful statement, if you can put those two things together. For Michaela's work, right, we saw the words alternative printmaking, beadwork, paper making. Yeah, like we definitely saw that in these examples. That's beaded on paper, right? So she's really laying it out in a very direct way. One thing I don't really see in her statement is a connection to the concept of her work. I'm not quite sure like what her inspirations are or where she's coming from with that imagery. And maybe that's okay. Maybe the gallery didn't want that information, or maybe that's not the main focus. And that's just a question to ask yourself. Like, is that important for your viewer to know? If it is, then make sure you include it, I think. So this is from my own website, and this is just my my about page, very simple. And obviously I did something similar. I put some kind of biographical information, and I did the elevator pitch there. So my research and studio practice explores and reconsiders the commonplace objects of everyday life and mass production, creating an intimate link to our relationship with labor and the built environment. One sentence to kind of give you a little bit of an idea of where I'm coming from with my work. So that's the strategy I'm using there as well. But I definitely have all the different variations of statement lengths and all of that. Okay, so kind of growing from the single sentence statement, we're going to move to the 2 to 3 sentence statement. And I want to be clear that I don't necessarily think that you should start writing them in that order. Like, I don't think you necessarily have to begin from the short one sentence and move your way up. It might be best to start with the really long one and work your way down. It's like whatever you think works best for you, you know? So I'm just kind of moving in that way to kind of show different examples. So this is a jeweler. Her name is Erica Bello, and she currently works in Providence, Rhode Island. So this is on her homepage of her website, and she has a few different kind of categories of work. And so her production work, this is the sentence, or these are the sentences that she's using to describe that work. Since 2013, Erica Bello has created multidimensional work that bridges the gap between traditional and contemporary jewelry. Her collection is strongly connected to iconic images in jewelry and culture. Working with ethically sourced materials, Erica creates small batch jewelry pieces in her studio in Providence, Rhode Island. So if we look at the keywords in there, like what are they? And do they sum up the work? You know, the keywords to me are multidimensional, traditional, contemporary, iconic images, jewelry, ethically sourced, small batch. Those are like the main things that I kind of pull out from that when I'm reading it, that I expect to see when I read that statement. And again, like the question is, does that sum up her work? So let's look at her website. I'm going to stop sharing to pull that up. So here's her website, the kind of shop all page. And so if you look at it, there's a lot of consistency in the kind of way she's laid it out, obviously. And she has different sort of, you know, the artwork titles kind of relate to the shape that you see on the jewelry forms, the pendant forms right here. And then if we move down further, even from just this scrolling of this page, I'm already seeing like work that's not flat, right? It's dimensional. So that multi-dimensional thing. I'm seeing an aesthetic that is really, really different. Like it's not a really traditional aesthetic, you know, it's really bold lines, bright kind of brass or dark depth in that patina. So I think that she's working in a contemporary way, right? Like she's using shapes that are more contemporary. She's using text, you know, so that kind of resonates from her statement. And, you know, we also see that if we click on any of these things, that like, let's go to the pop-up weenie earrings in vermeil, okay, which tells me something about the shape. And then it also tells me something about the material in her title. But if we look at this, you're going to see that each of her pieces actually, they have a description, this here. So these earrings were handcrafted to create a lightweight and strong silhouette, mimicking a plump and juicy sausage. These earrings are whimsical and dramatic. This design is single-sided, allowing you to showcase the pop-up accents or the minimal silhouette. And then we've got information about materials that they can be made in, the size, and what that material is in case people that don't know, right? And then shipping information and how to contact her. So she's got it all there and it doesn't take up much space, right? So I think it really just sort of depends on the type of work you make when you're thinking about the artwork description. And it can be really best to summarize the description in a way that has key details for the buyer that the buyer wants to know. They want to know weight, they want to know size, they want to know materiality, right? So let's assume they've already read your overall statement. They understand the kind of things that you're working with. You want to catch their eye while they're shopping, and the images in that small statement can do that, right? So you need to tell them the specifics. You need to get them hooked, right, with the dimensions and all of those things, and make sure that they understand what it is that they could potentially be purchasing. Okay, so yeah, again, it's like straight and to the point. All right, so let me stop sharing my screen. And if you browse her website more, you're going to see that each piece has a different kind of description. So I'm going to go back to PowerPoint. Okay, so this is also on Erica Bello's website under her About page. And what you're seeing here is something slightly longer than that 2 to 3 sentence statement from the homepage. And it gives you even more information about her interests and how it is that she goes about her work. So she's saying, influenced by icons of value and strength, my work communicates an interest in the reinterpretation of powerful imagery. Forms arise from reoccurring motifs in culture and recede into minimal silhouetted structures. I think we saw that just from scrolling, right? Through the use of traditional and contemporary metalsmithing techniques, she's telling us how she makes it, graphic imagery is translated into wearable objects. The context, it's wearable. It's something we put on our body. The nature of each piece is amplified through the use of monochromatic industrial finishes. The surface, like how it's done. So she gives us kind of a lot with with very few sentences. So I think it's a really successful version of that kind of medium, moderate length statement. In these, you really do have more space to be more specific. So in order to get to what the key words are, it's really helpful as an exercise to write down those words first, right? The key words, the ones that you use to describe your work. If I did that for my own work, I would say jewelry, minimal, found material, staples, repetition, mass production, so on and so forth. And then I would use that list and move from there to kind of build out my statement. So this is an image of my work, and this is kind of my moderate statement that I use. And I've got the kind of words I just said and the words some main parts of my work anyway, highlighted there. So a humble staple is often overlooked, yet I'm drawn to its recognizable form and rhythm of use. Repetitive actions of layering, patterning, and systematically constructing replicate the pace of mass production, but not its protocols. Reflecting upon the unknown makers whose process creates a product that becomes my raw material, I capture labor in the form of jewelry. So I tell you what the material is, I tell you what it is, it's jewelry, therefore its context, how it's worn, but also parts of it explain how it's made and my interest in why I make it at all. So in just a few sentences, I'm able to kind of capture that. Okay. So I thought maybe we could do an exercise. I hope, Miren, that you're here. I'm doing this for you. Miren de Leon lives in Juarez, and she is recently working on a new body of work. And these are kind of 2 images that I plucked from your Instagram if you're here. And I thought maybe it could be interesting as a group that maybe we could just type into the chat the keywords that you would use to describe Miren's work. I don't even see the chat, actually. Let me pull it up. Okay, there we go. I see it now. So anyone out there, if you could describe these pieces, what are they? First of all, you can, that would be maybe a keyword. And then what else about them? How could you describe what you're seeing? Natural versus geometric. Necklaces. Perfect. What else? What else? Right? I think obviously, yeah, they are necklaces. We see them worn on the body, right? So they go together. Natural versus geometric. Yeah, we have kind of these straight lines that sort of kind of lift up or hold this organic thing. That's another word that Gabby's using, organic. Necklace, color, shine, patina, lightweight. Definitely. Yeah, these are all great examples of the keywords that Miren might use in her own artwork description, right? I think even the word wearable, right? What about the actual materials? I mean, that would take the artist to make sure we know exactly what they are, but just, if my educated guess would be that we're working with pearls, but are they freshwater pearls? Are they, what type of stone is this, right? So giving details that are specific like that, I think can be really helpful to kind of build out your statement in a way that makes it unique to you and not just anyone's, right? Like these words are all perfect, right? They begin to describe what we're seeing, but how do we differentiate out there, right? If we're talking about jewelry, like how do we make ours way more unique than another piece that's also natural and geometric and also lightweight, right? So what is it about this work that is unique to you? So that's another thing to think about too. Okay. And I know that Miren is on Instagram at Miren-jewelry or underscore jewelry. Someone can correct me if we pull it up. Okay, thank you for participating in my exercise. Okay, so another consideration is whether to write in first person or third person. And I think we've seen a little bit of both as we looked at some examples here. And so really I think that's kind of up to you in a lot of ways, but also like there's no right or wrong. I don't think. It kind of also depends on the context. Like what is, thank you, Alex. Thank you, Jorge, for including that. Miren's Instagram is in the chat. I think it depends on the context and what the statement is for, like where the statement's going. And so I know that kind of first person, it can feel sort of friendlier in a way to say like, I make jewelry and I make it because XYZ. And third person is Jess does this, Jess makes because of this, right? And it can feel, it is detached, right? And I think it just depends what you like, what you prefer. On my own that you saw, I'm working in third person. I have that little bit of a detachment to it. And I think that's really up to you, but it's something to consider. And as you're writing, to make sure that you don't flip-flop between those two things, that you keep that consistent, that you don't start by saying, Jess makes jewelry out of staples. I do this because, right? You want to keep it consistent. Okay, so specific to e-commerce or selling your work online, right? You want to avoid something that's too lengthy in a kind of statement. And so I'm gonna, again, show you some more examples. This is Or Jewelry, and this is made by a woman based in Brooklyn, New York, and you can check out her website. And I think that Or Jewelry is a really good example, again, of being really kind of direct, succinct, to the point. And, here is a combination, once again, about kind of bio information to start, and then leads into that kind of 2 to 3 sentence statement. So inspired by optics, light, and color play, her current body of work, so this is third person, is an expression of metals and glass in a wearable state. So we know materials and its function. She creates both functional and non-functional jewelry that is sensitive to fluorescent light. By way of lamp working, so process, she shapes each glass piece over a 2000-degree flame. Even more detail about process that helps the viewer kind of imagine it, where all parts are then hand cut, cold worked, and set into pieces that highlight their intense optic qualities. She expresses her love of the materials with her permanent collection in one-of-a-kind pieces. So we know how it's made. We have a little bit of insight to how it's made, and we kind of have some insight into what to expect when we look at it and what types of work there are. There are collections of work and there are one-of-a-kind pieces. So I'd like to look at Bianca Or Jewelry's website as well. Okay, so this is the shop all page on Or Jewelry. So think about what we just heard, like think about what I just read, and now look at this work. Okay, so light, color, jewelry, it's functional, right? So we're seeing that reflected in the work that we're looking at. And if we click on one, kind of like Erica Bello, right? We have, well, you have detail images to show kind of different ways of it being worn. But also here on the right side, right? We have materials, flamed work, borosilicate glass and sterling silver. And then what I really like about this is that it kind of tells you a little bit more about how to wear it. Like, so from a static image, you don't always get that. So in the statement, that might be necessary. If you make something that is kinetic, something that moves, you need to work that into your statement. So, and she's kind of letting you imagine what that's like. Enjoy these kinetic dangles as they shift from transparent yellow in natural light to transparent pink in fluorescent light. So we understand what might happen. Chain is able to slide through tube for multiple aspects of styling. Pull the chain all the way through for a minimal feel or wear them halfway for asymmetrical vibes. So I like that, like when we look at these images, we see the last one was yellow, right? Now we see the pink, and then we see like the different ways that it's being worn. She's also giving us the length and information about shipping. So, I mean, that's specific to the e-commerce, right? But that statement really tells a lot about elements of work that are not given when we see just an image. So I think that that's really important, especially in something like jewelry or even functional kind of ceramics. How do you use these things? And what is it that you need the viewer to know about how to use it? So that's really, really important. Going back to this. Okay, so how do you write this thing? How do you write an artist statement? I think, as I've kind of highlighted, like start with keywords, like we did with Midens, like figure out what are the most notable things about the work. How do you describe it? So that can also be really, you can do that on your own, right? But it can also be helpful to talk it out with somebody else. Find someone that you want to share this with and write it all down, take notes. Tell them about your work and write down what you say or record what you say. Maybe even ask them what they see in your own work and write that down too. Reflect on it, describe it. That's a good place to begin. As for your general statement, the one that's more kind of broader about who you are as an artist, your main inspirations, you can ask yourself questions like, what processes or techniques do you use and why? What do you see in your artwork? What do other people see in your artwork? What are your goals and inspirations as an artist? And what subjects and themes are you interested in? And I really think that those questions are not really there to write the statement. Those aren't the answers to your statement, but they really help you understand yourself and yourself as an artist and how to write something that is unique to you as an artist. And that's really maybe the first step is, what do you do? Like, I think for artists, the easy part is sitting down at your studio, at your bench, at your wheel, at your press, whatever it is. The easy part is making it. So you actually have to do the work to figure out why you do it and what it is you're trying to express. And starting by answering some of those questions will really help you get there. And again, they might not be the answers to the statement, but you got to understand that to begin with. I think a really great way to start is also to pay attention to other artists and how they talk about their work. Just like I'm showing these examples, like whose website or whose statement did you read lately and think, wow, that's like really a great statement. Like I really, or how did you resonate with work that you saw and read? Maybe ask yourself, why did you resonate? Like maybe that statement was so well written that it provided you with something that you didn't have otherwise. So reflect on other writings and see what they're doing in their writing to guide you and to help you figure out what kind of style it is that you want to write in. For me, I like to grab a pen and a paper and I just like to word vomit, just start writing stuff down and see, you know, just like you guys typed into the chat, like just see what I'm thinking and see what comes out. And so this is an example of a page in my sketchbook. And I was writing down, once again, keywords. I was making connections through a brainstorming process to get started in writing an article. Actually, writing an article about another artist's work, not my own, Aide Alonso, if she's here. And this is how I started it. You know, I thought about her work and I wrote down all the words I could use, I could think to describe her work. And then there's some arrows and then there's some circles and then maybe there's like opposites happening, but I'm starting to try to figure out like what it is her work is doing in language, in words, right? Like, so I'm laying it down on paper. This is the same process I use for my own statement. You know, I just lay it out on paper. I write it down. Maybe you type it, whatever you like to do. And then, you know, I write down everything in relation to the work, and then I write down the opposites. So you can see attach, detach, right? Connection, disconnect. Like, I think it's important to understand what your work is and what it's not, because I think sometimes we understand things by what they aren't. And maybe that's an interesting way to frame what you do. So I like to do that a lot when I'm brainstorming. You know, these things are, you're not going to use all of these words when you write, but it's going to help your brain to like shift and gear, you know, gear your brain to those writing, those terms that you need and that skill to fine tune what it is that you're trying to say. So here's a small section of the writing I did after I brainstormed. And you can see, once again, I'm highlighting some of the words that I used that come right from that page in my sketchbook. So the liminal space of the border inspires the work, but it does not define it. I'd argue it can't because the definition's too loose. Aide's work proves that the more we try to define it, the less clear it becomes. And that is the point, to let go of what we're told about division or yours and mine, and instead seek out what's ours, what we have in common, and what we could share. And this is an article called A Blurring of Boundaries that I wrote for a local Azul Arena magazine, a local El Paso Juarez magazine. So you can see some of those words, right? And there's actually more pages of brainstorming. I just put one up here for you. And I really think it's helpful to write it down because it puts you in a mindset that helps you to kind of frame and think about what it is you're trying to say, really. So I think, you know, what should you avoid when you're writing? Like, what is it that you want to not do when you write? So I think I said it before, like avoid the big lofty words, like the things that are just like so far out there that really puff up what you're trying to say. I think that it sounds pretentious a lot of times, if I'm blunt, right? I think just write the way you would speak, write from your own voice, actually. And if you talk like that, then okay. But I think just write the way you talk to your friends, to your family members, put that down on paper. Let that be your statement. And that, I think, is the most honest way that you can write the thing. Write really directly and for anyone to understand and to connect with. That's the main goal. Super important is to edit, right? So you write the thing out. And I guess I should back up a little, right? You have all these keywords and what do you do with them? How do you fill in the blanks, the in between? And kind of what I just said, how do you talk? Like, how do you describe things? Write in your own voice. Use the keywords to fill in those descriptors, those things that you need to get the, you know, viewer to understand, but just write it directly and write it, you know, a good place to start is my work is, or my inspirations are. Like, those are great kind of starting phrases. And I think really just be true to yourself and write it from your own point of view. And once you've done that, this is where you go, right? You edit this thing. And I think it's super helpful to have at least one, if not two people do it. Ideally, they're writers themselves or they're editors even. But at the very least, they can be someone else who's a good writer, someone that you trust to kind of filter out the stuff you don't need, the fluffy stuff that you've written in there, and to check the grammar and to check the spelling, and all that stuff is really important. I think even some of my examples I've shown today, there are some grammar things that, I wanted to like check those for that artist. But make sure that you really get someone who can, or more than one person who can edit this thing. I really can't emphasize it enough, like really proofread your writing. Lots of little mistakes happen, spelling and grammar, as you just kind of type stuff out or write stuff out. So it's really, yeah, you just have to edit it. I don't know how else to say it. Okay. So finally, just so you know that a statement, it's always a work in progress. They never really end, I don't think, like as a working artist. Maybe the statements that you do for a particular body of work that you work on for a full year, right? And then you write the statement for that. That maybe that's not going to change, right? You might not go back to that body of work. So that's more fixed in time and place. But your general statement and who you are as an artist, that shifts, it evolves over time. So you've got to know that like it's an evolution in writing, and that, those things change. And so it's a part of the process. It's really normal. And so you're always going to be going back to edit. I can't tell you how many versions of a statement I have on my computer that are artist statement. I started putting dates, artist statement, May 2015, artist statement, December 20, and kind of tracking the progress of them. And I'm always going back to them and seeing like, what was I thinking about then? And does it relate now, right? They're always useful. So, but they do shift and they do change over time. And that as you write, just like anything you learn, any skill that you learn, that you practice, it gets easier. So it's daunting at first, for sure, right? But just think about it as putting the way you speak down on paper, right? And then having someone help you refine that and make it really smooth and make it really coherent. And over time, by practicing that process of writing, you're going to get better at it. It's going to become a lot easier for you. You're going to be filling out those grant applications in the few days before they're due, and you've got it, right? So, or updating your website when you need to for your online sales coming up for the holidays, like you'll get more practice, therefore making it easier for you to, put that out in the world. Okay. So that's all I have. So thank you everyone who's here. And I kind of wanted this to be really open and for you to be able to ask me questions. I guess one thing I didn't really do is sort of like say that there's not a formula for writing a statement. I think the keyword thing is the best place to begin. And I think that practice is the best kind of, practicing your process of writing, figuring out what kind of writer you are, even though you're not necessarily a writer, but that you just have to start putting it out and getting feedback from other people and seeing if it resonates with other people, because that's the goal, is to put it out in the world. And maybe you're trying to sell something. So ask somebody, does this description describe this? Does it make any sense? And see what they say. Okay, so the chat. Thank you. Oh, thank you. Please ask me questions. And I know that Lauda has the ability to turn someone's mic on if they want to not just type it, but actually ask it. So we could do it that way. I'm totally open to that. Even maybe if you've got like a statement, can I critique it? Can I give you some feedback on your short statement that you might have? Maybe not your long statement, but your short statement. I'm totally willing to do that. And that can be helpful for other people to see, I think, as well. Let me know. Anyone? No one? Does anyone? Okay. No, would anyone like to take the floor? Or does anyone else out there have a suggestion? Anything that they have found helpful when they're writing? All right. Okay, Jorge. Jorge Calleja is a visual artist who focuses in graphic design and web design, but he'll take a stab at any project if it sounds fun enough. I like to keep people guessing. Is that wrong? That's a good question. And I'm guessing that this thing is attached to images of your work, right? Like if we're talking about an online marketplace, right? Like this is a place where they're going to read that and they can also see what you do. And I think what you have highlighted in this statement, yes, website with work. What you've highlighted here is who you are. You're a visual artist as opposed to a performing artist, right? So we expect to see visual stuff, but also the focus is in graphic and web design. But he'll take a stab at any project. So if you're using your website to appeal to potential clients, it's a really fun way that you're stating this, like that you are really open to other things. You're not stuck, you're not rigid. You're not saying I only do this. You're saying that, you know, you're there, hire me. Like I am a freelance, I can do anything, right? So I think that it's you are keeping people guessing, but you're also still being specific. And I think attached to the work, they'll get a sense of what you can do and feel confident that they can maybe ask you, can you also do this, right? I think that that's really beneficial to the way that you work, like knowing that you take on other, you know, any kind of project. That I think it's good. But it'll take a stab at any project if it sounds fun enough. Yeah, I think maybe maybe you could add, like, this is a great, the single elevator pitch. Maybe you could add something about your general style. Like, are you a traditionalist or, you know, I'm not a graphic designer. So like, is there a way that you can put something about the general style that you use? I know that that changes with graphic design, but is there something that differentiates you? Like what does differentiate you from someone else? Maybe that could be another thing to add. That would be really beneficial for someone looking to hire, seeing it on your website, but also then being able to read that you kind of recognize that in yourself, I think is helpful. Alex, I find writing about myself super difficult and find myself writing as a brand. Is that okay? Weird. Oh, from Paulina. Okay, so you find, oh, writing about yourself. Okay, yeah. And find writing as a brand. Yeah, I think that's okay. That's kind of going to that first person, third person thing. Maybe it's not only about like what, it's the context, right? Like, do you feel more comfortable saying that this is your brand, your company? I think that that's fine. I think just keep it consistent because then it's not confusing to people, right? I see that all the time actually, where you know that it's a single person making this jewelry, but they say, you know, here we are doing this, you know, and I think that's okay. If it makes you comfortable, then yes, I think do that. Just keep it consistent and how you talk about it. Yeah. I am we. Uh-huh. Yeah. I think that's fine. Maybe it doesn't hurt to put something on your website about who the we is though. I don't know. I think it depends what you want. Like, it depends, you know, how much you want to put out there. And again, like if you're not comfortable, then no. But if you think it's, you know, I showed a few examples where the artist image is next to their statement. I used to have mine up and I felt weird about it, so I took it down. Like, you could do things like that, you know, say, you know, Paulina Rosas Designs is Paulina Rosas, and say, you know, who you are, and so that people can connect to it and maybe see what that's like. But again, just consistency, I think, is the most important thing. What else? Anyone else? Well.
Hi, everyone. So if there's no more questions, I think we're done. Thank you everyone for joining, for sharing about the sessions. Just know that all the sessions are recorded and you can go back to them on our YouTube channels. Of course, follow us on social media. We have a YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and check on our website often. Though when I'm the show chair, by the way, the question that I get asked the most is if you can still apply for the show. and the application opens in March every year. So just, stay in touch with our social media, our website, so that you don't miss any deadlines. And I think that's all. Thank you everyone for joining us.
Yeah, thanks so much for attending and asking questions, and feel free to reach out to me. If what I didn't put on my slide is any kind of contact info for myself. I'm going to type it into the chat. My email address, if you have specific questions, you can email me. So there's my email, and then my Instagram handle. So if you want to find me on there, I'm like more than willing to help. I actually love writing and I love editing writing. And I don't consider myself a writer. I find it as another kind of outlet, creative outlet, or just another way to articulate. So I would love to help. If you have specific questions, let me know.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, Jess. And thank you, everyone.